Greetings, friends. Welcome back to another summer edition of In Other News. Big news been going on here locally in the mid-Atlantic of the great United States of America. Last week we had this bizarre meteorological phenomenon called a derecho swept through with 65-mile-an-hour winds, a front of winds which just swept through and knocked down like a tenth of the trees, and millions of people without power, and chaos ensued, and people were waiting an hour to get into a Burger King. Oh, I worry about our country when a high wind can cause mass chaos. But anyway, also this week was, of course, the 4th of July. Happy Independence Day, everybody. It was yesterday. Today's July 5th. And instead of the typical boring fireworks display, by the way, did anybody hear about the San Diego fireworks display? The whole thing shot off at one time. A 10-second firework explosion. I would have went to see that. I hate the regular lame ones. So instead of going to the lame fireworks display around here, me and the kid went to go see the new Spider-Man. Why would I bring that up? Well, I'm sporting my Marvel shirt. Got to give props. The reason I'm doing a podcast is not about Spider-Man, but there was a scene of Spider-Man where he falls through a roof into an old wrestling hall exhibit, and he looks up and he sees a Lucha Libre poster. That's the Mexican wrestling. You might have heard of luchadors, the Mexican wrestlers that wear masks. And I thought it was clever. I had never seen that in a Spider-Man interpretation before. It was before he actually became full-on Spider-Man. I was trying to figure out his identity and stuff. So he sees this poster, huge old classic poster of a luchador wearing the wrestling mask, and that's where he gets the idea for the Spider-Man mask. And I'm like, dude, that's genius. I never saw that anywhere before. I like it. Anyway, thinking about luchadors and Lucha Libre, free fight, made me start thinking about Mexico. Let's jump today, just for a few minutes, to talk about what's going on back in Mexico, south of the border. And the big news last week, / this week, is that they just had their presidential election. Now, I know most Americans don't care about the Mexican presidential election. Most Americans aren't even going to vote in their own election here in a few months. But it is actually kind of big news. And yes, it does affect you here in America, who's running Mexico just south of the border. Why is it important? Just a couple of things. First off, who is this dude? The new president. Woo! He is going to be a wild card of a president for sure. It's President Enrique Peña Nieto. I'm just going to call him President Peña. Why? Because I like saying Peña. President Pena is a unique character, to be sure. He's a pretty boy, for starters. Sorry if I'm going to offend any of my Mexican friends. He is the most photogenic, pretty boy. A lot of folks are already comparing him to kind of like the JFK-ish, John Edward-ish lifestyle, where he's young, he's photogenic. People love him because he's beautiful, which, of course, is a terrible reason to ever elect anybody. On top of that, the guy lives basically a soap opera. If you were in Mexico, that'd be a telenovela. And the soap opera he leads is that he's young and pretty, all right? Handsome, not pretty. He's young and pretty, and he's married to one of the main stars of soap operas in Mexico. Yes, he's married to basically a Hollywood star. So already it's weird. Perhaps he's had a few children out of wedlock. I think he had a first or second wife. He's very politically connected. I think his uncle and his great uncle were mayors of Mexico City, or the state of Mexico, which is a sub-state. I don't know. Politics is in the family, in the blood. Again, another kind of parallel to the JFK legacy, the Kennedy family. So very well politically connected on the inside, and leads a very, I don't even know what fairy tale-ish style life. So first off, on top of that, a lot of his detractors already say that he's more like George Bush than JFK. That is, he's politically connected is how he got the office. Family relations is how he got the inside track. And that actually he's not that smart. Now, I'm not saying I'm saying that. I've read a lot of disparaging commentary about this guy already. He hasn't even taken office, saying that he's pretty much, not well-read, a complete, blunder, dunder, idiot. And you know what? People who hate particular politicians will say that about anybody. However, there are the George Bush parallels are interesting for lots of reasons. So are the JFK. So he's kind of like a JF Bush. Put them together. Now, why is it actually really important to know who this guy is? Well, his political party, the PRI, just got back into power. So, you know, the PRI, not that you know Mexican politics, the institutionalized revolutionary party, these guys had a lock on power for like 70 or 75 years. They're the only political party that ever won everything. And because they were in power so long, with so much power, they eventually got corrupted. And it's one of the reasons they lost power 12 years ago. So the PRI had power forever, since the Mexican Revolution up to like 12 years ago. And then the last 12 years, the other side has won. If you were to roughly translate their political parties to American political parties, the PRI would kind of be Democrat. I guess they're kind of liberal left. I guess. And the PAN, the PAN, would be like the Republicans in the United States, a little more conservative. So the PAN is the group that's been in charge for the last 12 years, been running the country and the presidency, after 70 plus years of not being in power. The PRI got thrown out of office mostly because they'd been there for so long. They kind of gotten corrupted. It was largely rumored, and I think accepted at this point, not even rumored, that one of the reasons that the drug wars have gotten so out of control, or drug cartels got so out of control, is that so many people in the PRI establishment were so corrupt, were basically working in league with drug dealers to keep violence down. If everybody's corrupted on the take, then the drug dealers never get busted, and so there's no cause for violence. And here's where the story gets important for you to understand Mexico and the U.S. today. Once that PR party got thrown out and the other guys took over, particularly the current president, that would be President Felipe Calderon. I know you know who that guy is. Felipe came into power from the other political party and said, we're going to clean up this mess, and we're going to go take the fight to the cartels. That's what's been going on since Calderon took office 6 years ago. That's the cartel war you've been hearing about, been reading about. 55,000 deaths attributed to the cartel war since Calderon took power 6 years ago. So it's kind of a very big deal that now this PRI group, the other team, is back into power. And this is where I'm going to bring it home to you. Here's why it's important to know who this guy is. He may amount to nothing. Who knows? He's not even president yet. Calderon hasn't turned over the reins of power. And by the way, Mexico has a one-term limit. A 6-year presidential term, one term. That's why Calderon was not running again. And it was a real horse race to see who was going to win the Mexican presidency. They have 3 main political parties down there, not just 2. And I guess I should preface this whole new President Peña. He may end up doing nothing because his political party does not control Congress. All right? There's 3 main political parties. They do. The PRI does not control Congress. They now control kind of the White House, okay, the Mexican presidency. That's it. So nothing may come of this guy being in power. Maybe he's a lame duck to start off with. Who knows? But he sure is good to look at. So why is it then important for Americans to know what's going on with this President Peña? Because he is from the other side of the aisle, so to speak. All the questions that American politicians and the American president and the American public should be asking is, what is this guy going to do about the drug policy? Will he, as a more supposedly liberal character, will they start talking about legalization? Will he continue the policies of his predecessor, Felipe Calderon, with this war on drugs, war on the cartels, that's been exceptionally bloody and horrific for Mexico for 6 years? These are real questions, and this guy taking power may change policy in a very big way, which will have an effect in Mexico and obviously here in the United States, because we're the consumers of all the drugs. We don't care about the violence. Mexico, you can have all the violence. We'll just take the drugs. So what has this guy done thus far? He's president-elect. He's not even taken office. All indicators so far are that he's going to continue the war on cartels. That's what he's saying. By the way, I don't know how anyone would possibly get elected in Mexico saying anything but that. If anyone were to come out and say, I want to be president of Mexico and I'm going to run on a platform of full legalization of all drugs, I can only imagine the billions and billions of dollars the U.S. government would spend to make sure that dude did not get elected. So you would almost be unelectable if you ran on a platform of any sort of legalization. Having said that, the guy now won by a very narrow margin, by the way. That's why I'm saying he may be lame duck before he even starts. Already he's now saying, of course, we're going to keep up the fight on cartels. We're not going to return to the old days of the PRI party that were wildly corrupt, where too many people were on the take, which is why the laws weren't being enforced and why the drug cartels got so wildly out of, it's too much power to begin with. So we're not going to return to that. But there's always a but. Perhaps he's going to conduct the war on the cartels differently. And what they are already starting, they're desperately trying to claw together, a structure of a plan, because he just won. Politicians only care about trying to win up to the election. Now they actually have to start doing a job. So they didn't have any policy in place of how they were actually going to deal with the cartel war. But now what they're saying is, hey, let's scramble, let's put together a package. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to keep fighting the cartel war, but we're going to shift off of Felipe Calderon's old plan, which was to attack the cartel heads, to try to bump off the heads and high-profile bust, to go after the big syndicates, the top men. And the other thing that Felipe did was he's been using the military to do it. The actual Mexican military is the ones conducting the war on the cartels, not local police. And the reasons that was happening is because all local police, not all, but corruption was rife within all levels of the Mexican police force. And we're talking from the federal government on down to the state police force to local police forces. One of the things Calderon's been trying to do is for the last 6 years is attack the drug cartel big guys, but also root out corruption. A lot of people don't like Calderon now because this war's got very violent, and people are over the violence. A lot of people think that maybe they voted in President-elect Peña because they were hoping that he is going to basically cut a deal with the drug cartels and say, let's bring the level of violence down. Again, who knows if that will happen. So Calderon's take has been, hey, we're going to root out corruption. Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to give him a shout out. They're doing pretty good. Yes, it's a horrifically bloody war down there. But in terms of trying to root out corruption, Calderon's peeps have done pretty good. They try to wipe the slate clean of all local corruption and federal corruption, basically fired all the FBI and are putting in new ones. So hopefully they'll turn over a new leaf and do a lot better. Now with new President Peña coming in, he is saying, here's what I'm going to shift. I'm going to shift away from trying to attack the head cartel guys. Of course they'll still do investigations and stuff, but they're not going after high-profile people and high-profile, big shoot-em-up in the streets kind of ways. He's saying they're going to focus on preventing local violence. And he's already announced we're going to also try to reestablish better local police forces to stop local dudes from running drugs through towns, but also local dudes from kidnapping. Kidnapping is kind of a big business in Mexico. So that's President Peña's big, announced plan thus far. I did want to end with this little note, though. So the cartel war is perhaps not going to go away, which is what some Mexican voters maybe thought. The PRI says they're not going to cut any deals just to reduce violence, which is what a lot of voters probably thought. However, he said he's going to shift the approach of the drug cartel war in Mexico. But also this. This is the fun part. He has said, obviously, I do not support legalization of anything, not even marijuana. I personally don't support legalization of anything. That's what he says already. But, there's always another but. But perhaps we should start having serious talks about legalization of marijuana to start for sure amongst the people of Mexico. He's saying, not me, I'm not supporting this, but this is a democracy, and maybe we actually need to start having a national dialogue, and that I like. I don't care if he is as clueless as George Bush. I don't care if he is a pretty boy like JFK. That would be a tremendous shift in policy from anything that any Mexican president or politician has said forever in Mexico. And that, my friends, would have gigantic repercussions on the United States. Of course, as I've suggested in the past, any legalization of any drug south of the border has gigantic repercussions to the United States, who has firmly planted its head in the ground and buried it with cement, determined to never legalize anything and just deal with the repercussions, even if they have to jail their entire populations. Side note, the United States, of course, has the biggest number of people in prison than any other place on planet Earth. Most of it, of course, is drug-related. Am I saying legalization? No. You should just know this stuff. And this is the stuff we should be talking about in the upcoming elections. But what are we going to be talking about? Probably like abortion or taxes or something. We're not going to talk about drug policy. Oh no, that's off the table for all candidates. Immigration? Oh no, we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about anything important. We're going to talk about side issues, of course, to get people fired up about nothing. Having said that, back to marijuana, Mexico, and the United States. I'm going to finish up where I started off with the movies. There's a new movie, I think it's starting tomorrow, called Savages. Anybody heard of this? It's an Oliver Stone movie, which I typically stay away from because he's kind of a goober. Personal opinion. However, it is about the Mexican cartels on the U.S.-Mexican border, and it's all about some marijuana growers and people trying to take over the turf. Mexican cartels taking over turf in the United States. That is real. That's real issues happening right now that's feeding into this whole debate about drug policy across all of the Americas. That's the real important issue that should be talked about, even in the U.S. election, that, of course, won't be. But now I've worked myself into a tizzy about everything. Spider-Man, the Savages. There's a marijuana link there as well, along with Lucadors in the Luca Libre. Fight free, my friends. Party on.